Everybody keeps talking about the end of the US dollar. Well, right now it's not ending. Right now, the US dollar does remain the top dog when it comes to global forex, to reserve currency status. Nothing else even comes close. But in the last 8 months, we've had more stories than we have in the last 20 or 30 years about the slipping dominance of the US dollar. So we have the big BRICS meeting this week. Of course, a lot of the BRICS countries are tired of being under the boot heel of US dollar dominance, US dollar backed sanctions regimes, and needing to buy US dollars to buy the things that they want. I mean, think about how absurd of a situation it is that if you are India and you want to buy oil from Saudi Arabia, you can't just pay in rupees. You can't pay in yuan. Well, now you can, but previously you couldn't. But you had to buy US dollars. So there's this constant, gigantic demand globally for US dollars because if anybody anywhere wants to buy oil, you have got to pay in dollars. But that's changing. And it's changing real fast. And the changes that are afoot right now, I think, are a very dangerous and volatile political reality, a geopolitical reality, a massive financial reality that anybody who has any exposure to fiat currency anywhere should be paying attention to. And of course, maybe an interesting moment for Bitcoin here as well. And obviously, I don't want a dramatic collapse of the US dollar or anything like that, because that means that a lot of people that I know and love, a lot of people I don't know, are going to have a very bad time. Ideally, you would see the rise of another currency and they could exist together. It's not necessarily what's most likely to happen, though, but maybe we'll see a BRICS currency rise up and it'll just be there along with the US dollar. But these are predators. These are financial predators. The US dollar is a big, angry, vicious lion that prowls the savannah, ripping apart opposition. Oh, hey Libya, do you want to do some oil trades for gold? Gah! Done. Same story with Iraq. I'm pretty sure Iraq wanted to do oil trades for gold as well, and you see what happened there. The U.S. dollar has maintained its dominance through a web of weaponization of the dollar and literal conflict from time to time. And so to think that the dollar is just going to go quietly into the night, potentially not the most likely scenario. So as we see a potential rising up of the BRICS nations and a potential BRICS currency coming into play, things start to get a bit crazy. Now, I want to share this here. This guy, Godfrey Roberts, sharing a quote: "Most Americans don't really understand the importance of dollar hegemony. It's effectively the only reason that the USA is not a third world country." It's a pretty extreme statement. Okay, the stock market's value and value of property and other assets as a result of money being sucked out of the global economy and directed into Wall Street via the dollar swindle. Then we have Mbridge. Mbridge is the Hong Kong-based platform for trading CBDCs. It goes live next month. Here's an interesting chart for you as well. This shows US dollar use in the China-Russia trade. In 2015, US dollar was dominant. In 2016, still dominant. 2017, basically parity. And then from 2018 downwards, the dollar stopped having any kind of prominence in trade between those two countries, to the point where now we're seeing 200 billion plus in bilateral trade between China and Russia, almost exclusively happening in non-dollar currencies, in Russian rubles and Chinese yuan. Probably some gold and stuff thrown in the mix as well, I would imagine. But that's pretty big. World's fifth biggest economy and second biggest economy, sidelining the US dollar. And I know that those are US strategic competitor countries, but still a big deal because they're quite large and powerful countries. I liked this from RFK Jr. as well. He said, "We made the worst possible geopolitical mistake. We pushed the Russians into an embrace of China." And there are political commentators who have talked about this for a long time. One thing that you don't want to do is push Russia and China together. Russia's got all the resources. China's got all the manufacturing power. They will create a pull against the United States instead of trying to be friendly with one or both of these countries. RFK went on to say we fueled BRICS, and now there's 40 nations. There's already 5 nations that account for a gigantic percentage of global GDP, global resources, global manufacturing, global population, global wealth, global growth. But those 5 nations, there's 40 countries, 40 freaking countries that want to join the BRICS group right now. That's incredible. Incredible. And when those 40 countries join BRICS, then we have a 45 country alliance that definitively controls the major commodities on earth. And they will be able to dictate the price of oil. They'll be able to dictate the price of food. They'll be able to dictate the price of metals, dictate the price of gas, so on and so forth, because they're going to control the majority of the supply. I mean, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Algeria, these are the countries that are looking to join. World's top oil producers are all going to be there. World's top food producers, world's top manufacturers. And of course, part of this situation is about getting off the dollar. Because all these countries largely share something in common. They have been, in one way or another, the target of sanctions, dollar weaponization, terrible IMF loans, terrible World Bank loans, predatory loans designed to strip countries of their natural resources and basically enforce neocolonialism. That's what these global development banks have done. So you see why BRICS is going to be popular if they're offering something different to that world order. And look, I know if you're based in the USA or in the West, you may not like hearing that there could be a new dog coming to town. And hey, maybe this is going to be a dog fight that's going to have to be resolved by World War III. And I hope not. It's terrifying to think about. But again, I don't expect the dollar to go quietly into the night. Usually these things are messy. And it's already happening, though. Here's an interesting story from Watcher Guru. They reported that India completes its first crude oil payments to the United Arab Emirates in rupees, officially ditching the US dollar for bilateral trade. How many more of these stories do we need to see before we start thinking the dollar might actually be in trouble? And I know right now the dollar's been showing a bit of strength, but I'm not thinking about what's happening this week, next month. What happens by 2030? What happens when 40 countries joining BRICS becomes 80 countries joining BRICS, 100 countries joining BRICS? The majority of the world's population exchanging value in local currencies or a BRICS-backed gold currency. Where does that leave the dollar then? Nobody's going to need the dollar anymore to buy oil. And US bonds, which have been, a mainstay of global central banks, who's going to want those when the country is going to be so deeply in debt? It's already 32 trillion in debt. It's only getting worse all the time. This interesting here from Gold Telegraph as well. China reduced its US Treasury holdings for the 3rd consecutive month in June. So China is dumping US Treasuries. Their holdings are now at a 14-year low, and I suspect that's going to continue downward for a long time. They have cut Treasury holdings by 11% over the last year. And they have added to their gold reserves for 9 straight months. Do you see what's going on here? China, the second biggest economy in the world, dumping dollars, buying gold. Russia, 5th biggest economy in the world, dumping dollars, buying gold. Other countries as well, dumping dollars, buying gold. Surprised the price of gold has not gone higher with all this going on. But a lot of the gold markets, silver markets, of course, are heavily manipulated by the same players. JP Morgan, BlackRock, Goldman Sachs. They manipulate metals markets. They issue out a bunch of paper, inflating and controlling markets. You guys know the story. It's an absolute mess. But here we go. China and Russia and other countries in the BRICS collective who've been talking about launching a gold-backed currency to replace the US dollar in international trade are dumping their US Treasury bonds and buying gold. That's interesting, isn't it? Now, before we get into the rest of this story, just a quick note. If you are a cryptocurrency investor and you want to know how to make it at the altcoin game, you got to check out Mastering Altcoin Investing. This is the course that I wish that I had had when I started investing in altcoins back in the day. It covers the altcoin basics, expectations of investing in this market cycles, different approaches to investing, how to airdrop, farm, and find token sales, psychology, profit taking tips, and much, much more. You'll find a link in the description, or you can go to the Wealth Mastery /courses where you can learn more. Now, let's talk about the BRICS Bank, because this is big. So BRICS Bank strives to reduce reliance on the dollar. Shanghai-based lenders president says it can become an institution made by developing countries for themselves. Dilma Rousseff, former president of Brazil, is the head of this new development bank. Dilma, she's been to jail twice for her political stuff. Once locked up by the military dictatorship back in the 80s, I think, in Brazil, and then recently locked up by the Bolsonaro government before being released by Lula. What a soap opera politically down in Brazil. Anyway, I digress. The BRICS Bank is a very, very interesting situation because the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, or as I like to call it, the International Mafia Fund, and the World Bank, also another mafia-like organization, have done all kinds of nefarious crap around the world. And I think you need to look no farther than what they did in, was it Bolivia? They went into Bolivia. And actually, I think one of the James Bond, Quantum of Solace, they kind of talk about this, but it was actually like the World Bank, and they made it out to be the evil villain in the James Bond movie, but it was actually the World Bank who did this kind of stuff. So they went in, they said, hey, we're going to give you a bunch of money. Here's a loan, sign on the dotted line, or the IMF, I think. And they said, okay, great. So they signed on the dotted line, and then they had to sell off all their public water utilities. And so they took the loan, sold off all the public water utilities. International corporations came in and bought up the water utilities, raised the prices. Suddenly, people's water bills went up to the equivalent of an average monthly salary. So your entire salary would have to go to paying your water bill. And this story's been repeated around countries all around the world where they've taken out railroads and they devastate economies. The IMF and World Bank have not been good actors. They have been the foot soldiers in the dollar-led order. And the BRICS Bank is a direct challenger to that. Where they're going to come in and say, hey, let's do business. Let's do some loans. Don't worry. We're not going to steal all your resources. You don't have to completely sell out your country to us. Let's just do business. We can all make money. Interesting stuff. Russian president, of course, saying the US dollar is losing its global role in an objective and irreversible process. But of course he would say that, old Pooty Potes. But it's true. It's true. We are slowly but surely seeing a move away from the US dollar. How long that takes is anybody's guess. But the writing currently is on the wall. Too many stories about too many countries moving away from the dollar, the rise of the BRICS group, and the impact of the rise of the BRICS group. It's pretty crazy stuff. Now, here's some interesting stats from the quiz letter. During this quarter alone, the U.S. is expected to issue a near record $1 trillion in treasury debt. Just a trillion with a T. This is the second highest on record after the $2.8 trillion issued in Q2 2020 during the global lockdowns. Over the next 2 quarters, the U.S. is expected to issue nearly $1.9 trillion in treasury debt. As spending rises and tax receipts fall, the U.S. is issuing record levels of debt to cover the deficit. Both spending and borrowing are out of control. Yeah. The debt to GDP ratio in the U.S. is now nearly 119%. In the year 2000, which is 50%. The United States has gone from being one of the 5 lowest debt to GDP countries to a top 5 highest in 23 years. Government spending is so high that 1.8 trillion in bonds are being issued over the next 6 months to cover the deficit. In just 3 years, the United States has borrowed over $8 trillion. By 2050, the debt to GDP ratio is expected to hit 225%. 225% debt to GDP ratio. That is absurd. It's absurd. And check this out. The US government debt will rise by $5.2 billion every single day. $5.2 billion a day for the next decade. US public debt by 2033 could hit $50 trillion. And so I ask you, with US debt scheduled to hit $50 trillion in 10 years, with people increasingly moving away from the dollar, how does the USA pay this debt without a massive default, a massive crash, some kind of giant event? And I don't want that to happen. I need to be really, really clear about this because it's going to mean so much pain and suffering. And it breaks my freaking heart seeing this crap happen because regular people are the ones that are going to suffer the most for all this shit. The politicians aren't going to suffer. The billionaires aren't going to suffer. The lords of industry and the lords of the banking world, they're not going to suffer. They're going to be fine. You, your family, the people you know, you're the one that's going to be in trouble by this crap. They have run a very dangerous game. And if BRICS is successful at what they're doing, it makes everything the USA doing completely unsustainable because the only reason the USA so far has been able to carry $32 trillion of debt and they can carry up to, well, $50 trillion in debt by 2033. Probably, what's it going to be by 2050 if they haven't defaulted? $100 trillion in debt? Why not? The only way they've been able to do this is because they can print money and people keep demanding it because it's needed for the global reserve currency. People needed to buy oil, but it's not true anymore. It's changing very rapidly. Countries around the world are ditching the dollar. And so when these countries no longer demand dollars, the value of the dollar suffers. When nobody wants dollars anymore, because, I mean, if you're a central bank in whatever country else in the world, you're holding dollars. The Fed keeps printing it. You have no control over that. They print it. They give it to their banker buddies. They front run everybody in the world. It's a massive swindle. And at some point, the piper will need to be paid. I don't know when that happens. Can they stretch it out another 5 years, another 10 years, another 20 years? At some point, there's a tipping point when that debt becomes completely unsustainable, when the servicing of that debt becomes half the annual budget. There's no money left for regular people. No one's using the dollar anymore. Everyone's fled. Everyone's using BRICS-backed currencies now. It's a crazy situation, man. It really is. And obviously, I hope for the best for the world. But I can't help but look at the situation and go, man, somebody screwed up really bad. And it's going to end really badly for a lot of people. Not the people who made the mess, but everybody else who's going to be left to pick up the pieces.